Welcome to Intuitive Astrology with Molly McCord. Thank you so much for joining me today as we're going to discuss the energies of Mars retrograde in Cancer, which begins January 6th, 2025 as Mars retrograde re-enters Cancer at 29 degrees and will travel back to 17 degrees of Cancer until February 23rd. This is when Mars will then station direct. So during this Mars retrograde in Cancer period, we have the energy of Mars, the warrior, the aggressor, the fighter, the one that asserts himself and is associated with physical stamina, action, desire, passion, how we go for what we want, how we move our physical bodies, and how we face conflict, now being repressed and feeling held back in the retrograde energies of Cancer. This is an uncomfortable Mars. This is a Mars that doesn't know what to do with everything he's feeling. And there's a lot going on here under the surface within that is being processed, churned through, and deeply felt. So we're going to discuss more of the layers of this in today's podcast because these energies are strong through January and through most of February. In part one, I discussed Mars retrograde in Leo. Now, as Mars re-enters Cancer, there's a return to the internal world that can be quite unconscious, inconsistent, and highly emotional when Mars is retrograde. Mars is comfortable moving energy externally, being able to do something in a physical sense. Mars is typically good at moving us forward, at moving through feelings and issues, helping us plow through the challenges of life while also feeling stronger as we do so. Mars assists us in developing confidence in who we are and what we want to go for. So this Mars retrograde in Cancer is actually one of the most uncomfortable energy experiences that this Mars can have, because not only is a Mars retrograde an unhappy warrior who's frustrated and impatient, but here he returns to the great mother of Cancer. Cancer is the first water sign of the zodiac associated with your personal world. Cancer is ruled by the moon and brings up the ebb and flows of our internal experiences, what we're feeling and sensing, not even being able to put words to it. There isn't a need for logical understanding in Cancer. Rather, you're just trusting what arises, what comes up, what is speaking to you, especially intuitively and emotionally. The Cancer energy is where we tap into what feels safe. Where do I feel safe in this big chaotic world? Where do I return to at the end of the day so that I can decompress and hear myself, hear what I need, what would be soothing, what would be comforting, and what would also allow me to release anything I've absorbed. The Cancer energy can be a strong empath, can be highly sensitive to other people's needs and feelings, what is unspoken in an environment. The Cancer energy tunes in to more of the vibes in the energy field and picking up on auras and subtle messages, subtle hints that are arising around others as well as within yourself. So that Cancer energy actually prefers more quiet, more downtime, more silence in order to hear what is moving through you and what is worthy of your attention, your time, and your focus. Cancer is how we connect to what we're feeling. It can be quite moody because of the inconsistency, just as the moon ebbs and flows and changes signs every 2.5 to 3 days. The Cancer energy is meant to move. That's a strength. The strength of flowing with whatever you're feeling today. Whatever is arising is perhaps absorbing all of your attention or taking you in to new uncharted territories. Cancer being the first water sign is also where we learn to take responsibility for our feelings and to trust what they are, to trust what you're feeling without needing external validation or proof, to simply allow an emotion to be exactly what it is, knowing that it will also keep ebbing and flowing, which is the natural flow of all emotions. So here we have the assertive charge that is typical of Mars being contained, being held back, and then being submerged into the watery domain of Cancer, where he can't take charge and move ahead efficiently. Rather, he's treading water. This is a Mars that is not comfortable being held back in a water sign of one's personal container of emotions. Now, the last time that Mars was retrograde in Cancer was back in 2007 to 2008. The Mars retrograde of 2007 started in November at 12 degrees of Cancer, and then Mars traveled back to 24 degrees of Gemini. So Mars is actually covering new retrograde territory here, nearly 18, 19 years later. And this is certainly stirring up much more that has been held back within us. And I want to discuss more of what to be aware of, because even though I've touched on some of the typical understandings of Cancer as it relates to what you're feeling, what you're sensing, what you're picking up on, the moodiness, the transitions, looking for safety, looking for downtime, there's much more that actually occurs within Cancer that's really important to understand when you're getting to the heart of what you're really feeling. And that would be a great way to look at this particular Mars retrograde in Cancer. Getting to the heart of what you really need. What you really need that perhaps has been denied, shut down, or misunderstood. The Cancer energy seeks to be understood for the feelings and for whatever is coming up. Looking for that safe harbor in the storm, that place to land that allows oneself to just be in the space of whatever is grabbing your attention. The Cancer energy is also connected to our first impressions of feeling safe in the world, which typically begins with our first tribal experience, which we call the family, the nuclear family. And so Cancer is that first container of where you live, where you are as an unconscious being, as a child who needs safety, who needs to be tended to and cared for. Cancer is how you experience family, what that means to you, what that looks like, and at a soul level, what we choose. We choose our family members, we choose our siblings, our parents, our grandparents. We choose what we want to experience in this lifetime for a number of reasons. And so Cancer is where our journey begins of connecting to others. And this is an important word to understand, because Cancer is what those first emotional connections imprint on us, how our energy is received, how we feel about being in that primal environment, whether our needs are being addressed and understood, whether our feelings are being heard and cared for. And so this is getting to the root of how our emotions learn to show up and be expressed. This is how we learn to say what we're feeling or to shut down and pull back. This is how we learn to ask for help or assume no one's available, everyone's too busy, no one can be there for you. Cancer is also where we hold these unconscious emotional imprints around how we feel supported, how we can turn to others when we have a bad day or when we need assistance with something. Cancer also is how we're able to be there for others. So there can be a very deep imprint here around giving and receiving that you learned as a child. Were others available to support you, to care for you? Or did you have to perhaps overextend yourself and be the giver in order to demonstrate your desire for connection, your desire to be seen, or any other thing that might have been moving through you at an unconscious level in order to feel some kind of emotional validation or connection to others in your family? Cancer is the family ecosystem, and various ways that we go about working with it, understanding it, because that also creates our norm or our normal understanding of what family is. Within the family unit, that's also how we unconsciously learn to manage any of those bigger feelings that can come up, especially around pain, hurt, anger, frustration, disappointment. It's how you understand, is it safe to say what I'm really feeling? Or am I going to be shut down? Am I going to be told no one wants to hear it? Am I going to be pushed away? And so when we look at this Mars moving through the second half of Cancer, it brings up more parts of our emotional world that we thought were normal, or we were taught and told were acceptable ways of expressing our feelings, understanding our emotions, trusting our gut, and feeling emotionally valued. And this retrograde Mars is most likely going to trigger and bring up these deeper core imprints that you've been holding that you haven't tended to or haven't caught your attention until now. Again, consider that it has been many years since Mars has retrograded in Cancer. And so not only was Mars retrograde in 2007 in Cancer, but as we go back further, Mars was retrograde in Cancer as well in 1992 and 1993. And that is when Mars was retrograde at 27 degrees of Cancer, traveling back to 8 degrees of Cancer. So when we examine that retrograde cycle, the last time Mars traveled through this part of your chart and created this type of havoc, anger, emotional energy was 30 years ago. Over 30 years ago, late 1992, specifically it started November 28th, 1992 until February 15th, 1993. So we're all dealing with these deeper energies that we haven't really had to examine or understand for over 30 years, at least in regards to a Mars retrograde. So this Mars can stir up issues around your younger self and your childhood, your emotional imprints, what you have held back or repressed, anything that you thought you were over, and it turns out you're not. It gets triggered and it brings up this much deeper layer of energy that you realize, wow, this goes back to my childhood. And if you've ever been in therapy or you've done any kind of internal work, you know everything tends to go back to our childhood in this lifetime. But of course, we could carry it from other lifetimes, other timelines. So it's up to you to determine how much this is working with you at your emotional core. This Mars retrograde in Cancer can bring up your coping mechanisms, how you learn to handle your feelings, whether you gave them any form of a healthy expression or not, whether you held back because you didn't want to appear weak or sensitive or be embarrassed. The Cancer energy fears vulnerability or being misunderstood and is learning how to maneuver through the world while holding your own, while holding that emotional core in place, knowing that the most important way to work with this energy is to understand it yourself, is to honor yourself, to hear what you're feeling, to validate the feelings, and to also now allow yourself to become your own parent, to nourish yourself, to give yourself what you didn't receive as a child. So we've got a big assignment here for caring and comforting our inner child, as well as understanding that we are the only ones who can be responsible for that. The immature or unevolved Cancer energy will seek to unload their emotions on others. And so this Mars retrograde can also highlight what is not regulated, where people are not able to handle their emotions. They lash out, big anger, big frustration. There's no ability to temper it. There's no ability to regulate it. And there is no one on the planet who's responsible for your emotions except for yourself. So this is also an assignment in your emotional responsibility, how you care for yourself, how you hear what you're feeling, and then you take care of it responsibly. You remove yourself from a situation or experience that is riling you up. You don't allow yourself to unleash your feelings onto others. And that's actually something that people don't realize, and they will just do. They will just let it out, thinking that, okay, that will release it, that will make me feel better. But the boomerang effect is that you can make everyone else feel worse. You could be spreading that vibration, that anger. You could be putting letting all of that frustration out into the world, which is a highly immature and irresponsible way of working with your feelings. So part of what this Mars retrograde in Cancer brings up is the state of your reactions, how you respond, and understanding that you're responsible for managing that, and what can you do better? What can you work on, even in small little ways, to calm that energy and to also know what your own habits and patterns are? Because this could go back again to coping mechanisms when you were younger. This can be related to anyone in your family that you grew up with who actually created some kind of angry response in you that you weren't aware of, and now it's coming out, especially in the workplace or in a friend environment or in any situation in life where we are unconscious of where that energy is going. So keep in mind that people will be creating conflict, emotional wars, rage, and setting off deep trigger points as part of this energy. And it demonstrates the inability to be conscious of it, as well as a lack of intention and a lack of responsibility. So our responsibility is always for ourselves, right? All you can do is manage yourself, what you're feeling and what is arising within you. But note that many others will not be conscious and will, in fact, be demonstrating the worst of this energy. Now, another thing to be aware of here with Mars retrograde in Cancer. Cancer in the physical body relates to the breasts, the womb, the uterus, the soft places in the body, and it's associated with the feminine reproductive cycle, the feminine energy that's connected to the lunar cycle. Cancer is also about feminine hormones. And this Mars retrograde could bring up messages around how the feminine reproductive cycle is working or not working, what is not regulated, what is not in a natural flow. This could show where energy is repressed or held back. Mars is associated with heat in the body. Mars is the red planet. So heat is the domain of Mars, which can include inflammation, rashes, blood flow, even blood that isn't flowing with a retrograde Mars. Chinese medicine discusses heat in the body. If any of this is resonating and you wanted to look into it a bit more, of course, consult a professional and someone trained in this knowledge and practices. But Mars retrograde in Cancer can bring up any areas of the physical body that are not in a balanced state, that are not flowing with a natural cycle or with how the body is designed to move, especially, again, blood flow and anything in the emotional body that's also designed for movement. Similar to crying. Crying is a beautiful expression of emotions, and it releases important hormones like oxytocin and those endorphins, which helps you feel better. You feel better after a good cry. You got out some stress, some worry, some pain, some fears, and you're able to then allow that energy to move through you and to not hold it back. So that would be a healthy way to stay aware of this energy. If you feel that you need any kind of emotional release, it's right on time, especially with this Mars retrograde, where it could feel like, how do I fight this battle? How do I express what I'm feeling? How do I remain in emotional control? How do I understand what's going on within me and understand the truer messages within? And again, this Mars feels weakened in retrograde in Cancer, and that means the universe is saying, it's not time to fight. It's not time to respond. It's not time to react. How does that feel if you were told that no response is necessary? No reaction is needed. There's nothing to do except to be in your feelings, to be in the experience. And perhaps that makes sense and feels good. And then we apply that to the real world, and maybe that isn't practical or realistic. It does signify that for some people, there will be losing battles. There will be things you can't fight in the ways you normally would. Yes, you can stand up for yourself. Yes, you can assert how you feel, but you might be grappling with something at a much deeper level that is requiring you to get to the heart of what this really is for you. Because Mars is in the sign of Cancer, and Cancer is associated with powerful feminine energies, you could feel like there are parts of your feminine energy that are being powerfully reworked, realigned, and responsibly managed. You could be understanding more of your internal energy system and how powerful your emotional body is and what that means for you, what that looks like, especially in a physical sense, since Mars is the body. Now, Mars retrograde in Cancer can also be associated with weight gain, water gain, holding more water in the body, needing more water, even seeking the comfort of a warm bath with sea salt in order to absorb and cleanse anything that is not meant to be in your energy field. I feel that this Mars retrograde in Cancer is also going to highlight what you've been absorbing, especially if you are highly sensitive or an empath. It's going to reveal what you're responding to that isn't yours, because that Cancer energy wants privacy and is internal. This Mars retrograde comes through and triggers the parts of yourself that can't find that can't get that quiet time or alone time. And then there can be a sense of feeling really defensive. So we're looking at, where do I feel I have to defend my needs? And a better word for defend is boundaries. Mars is about the fight and the defensiveness in Cancer, but if you can employ stronger boundaries that are focused on what you need and prioritizing that, it flips the energy. It switches it from being that reactive, responsive state to being more in a cocoon, to being focused on your own self-care and acting intentionally from that place that is self-loving and self-honoring. And I believe this is one of the main gifts of this Mars retrograde in Cancer. Even though it's an interesting combination and an uncomfortable dance, there's universal wisdom in every transit and every astrological pairing. So as this Mars is retrograde in Cancer, he will receive support from Neptune in Pisces at 27 degrees. This begins January 11th until January 14th, where you're receiving intuitive guidance around what to do. And that's important to Mars. Mars is a doer. What do I do with these feelings? What do I do in this situation? And there's going to be information that flows through from this Neptune in Pisces, again, exact January 11th until January 14th, which is probably going to say, do nothing, detach, allow, don't give energy to something, step back. Allow yourself a break, because that Neptune in Pisces is connecting you to bigger energetic messages. It's almost like, let people have their fights. Let people demonstrate the truth of who they are, whether they are immature, irresponsible, they aren't in charge of their emotions, they can't regulate, they're just running around as if there's no consequences and there's nothing that's going to get them. You know, it's a very childish energy. It's very immature. And so this trine from Neptune and Pisces is asking you to go higher and turn to your higher self for guidance, support, and unconditional acceptance. Because when we apply this Mars retrograde in Cancer to some of the archetypal understandings here that we've discussed, we can see that, okay, this might be a child who never felt loved to the mother, who never felt connected to a family unit, who never had a safe place to go. In fact, when we think about, again, how Cancer relates to the breasts, the womb, the uterus, Cancer is also your first attachment. It's the newborn's first attachment to the mother, learning to suckle on the breast, receiving breast milk. Very Cancer energy here. And with Mars coming through, there's a sense of, I was never cared for, I was never held, I was never supported emotionally. Even being able to hold a child close to your chest can regulate the child. And so whether you are a parent or a child, it's providing comfort, that all beings have a primal need for. But as we're adults and we get older, we can start to see and feel in ourselves, was I made to feel safe in the world? And you probably don't remember as a newborn your first attachment. But what is coming up here? Mars retrograde in Cancer, your attachment style. And these attachment styles can be much more evident to us, especially in recent years when there's been more collective conversation on attachment styles. And so Mars retrograde in Cancer brings up the worst of attachment styles, of people who are highly avoidant, of people who are fearful of intimacy, vulnerability, connection, that they are more comfortable lashing out, starting a fight, creating disagreement that's not necessary, creating conflict that's not necessary. And again, if you were to go back at a deeper level in one's experience, and at a deeper psychological level of their beingness, or rather your own beingness, because only you can do this for yourself, truly, it's to see, okay, when they were first born, were they welcomed? Were they wanted? Was this a child who was celebrated, needed, and honored, especially by the mother and the family unit? Was this a child who was welcomed and cared for, and everyone wanted to hold them and nurture them? That would establish that initial attachment style of feeling secure, safe, I'm wanted, I'm supposed to be here, my family treasures me, and I've known that since the day I was born. And then you would bring in all the other attachment styles: avoidant attachment, dismissive avoidant, anxious attachment, disorganized attachment. These are the other initial feelings that could have been imprinted at a core level from when you were first birthed through any time in your childhood when the caregiver, the parent, the person you sought for comfort and safety wasn't available. And if you were to say have that anxious attachment, you would want someone close, but you got used to being rejected or abandoned. You got used to someone not being there. If you developed avoidant attachment, then you're used to people being emotionally distant. You avoid that level of connection with others. You don't show up or open up for others. And you didn't have that from your mother, parent, caregiver, whomever. It also shows up as being too independent, being hyper independent, where you didn't have someone who could support you or be there for you when you needed it. So you learn to do everything for yourself. The dismissive avoidant attachment could be what you learned, again, unconsciously, but it's just always been how you've operated. It's been how you've approached life, approached relationships, approached people or friendships, connections, knowing that, you know what, I will always have to rely on myself, so I'm not going to get too close. I'm not going to trust another. I'm not even going to entertain the notion that they could be what I need. So all of this could be triggered or coming up here with Mars retrograde in Cancer. And one of the best uses of the energy is that Mars is about cutting through the emotional turmoil or the emotional cords that hold you back in the past. Mars can cut through what you've outgrown or what you want to change. Mars could unleash a giant machete around any attachment style that is no longer serving you. And I'm seeing an umbilical cord when I say that. Now, this is important to understand because the mother, whomever you chose at a soul level to be your mother, is your first soul contract and is your primary soul contract because you need a mother in order to be human. You need that mother, the womb, in order to arrive. And so we're getting to the heart of what that energetic imprint is for us. And because there can be a lot of discomfort, disappointment, tears, sadness, there can be a lot of sadness with this transit. And yet the universe is saying it's right on time. It's right on time to move through whatever that is for you. And as Mars is trining Neptune in Pisces, there could be an ease of flow around that because you could connect to what your soul is learning through that energy, whether that's through the sadness, through the mother, through attachment style. What are you learning that you at a soul level said, you know what? I'm also going to master this. I'm going to move through this. I'm going to flow with it. I'm going to be open to the vulnerable messages that come up because that's what's going to support me and allow me to grow. Cancer is also associated with growth, how we grow by being watered, how we receive emotions, we receive love and affection from others. The ability to receive is a healthy Cancer state. And so it's understanding I haven't received what I needed. How am I able to receive what I need? What do I need? All of that can come up with this Mars retrograde in Cancer as, again, you get to the heart of who you really are inside and what you really need. This is some deep stuff. I know you're like, Molly, I thought I was listening to an astrology podcast. Oh no, we're going into attachment styles. We're going into your childhood. We're talking about your mom because it's all connected and it's all astrological. Now, as Mars continues retrograde, Mars will also have a supportive sextile to Uranus at 23 degrees of Taurus retrograde. This connection will occur January 22nd to January 25th. And this Uranus retrograde in Taurus breaks something free, breaks it off, breaks you open, elevates the energy, but it's meant to be brilliant in some regard. You have a brilliant insight. You get a message that says, wow, this is why I've been through this. This is what has unconsciously connected to my self-worth and my self-value, how much I've been able to hold or contain. But I see it now. I see it differently. I see it more clearly. The sextile to Uranus and Taurus can bring about clarity through simplicity, making it basic, making it obvious, giving you that, oh my goodness, this is such an exciting understanding of what's been going on within me. And then it can also bring up more to process and clear. Now, the energy to be aware of here that I think could be the most potent will be when Mars is retrograde at 19 degrees of Cancer and is going to square Chiron at 19 degrees of Aries. This can feel highly personal. This is when you want to be aware of what's coming up within you and how the emotions are flowing and moving. Now, what's interesting is that Mars is the ruler of Aries. So Chiron has been in this Aries energy, stirring up more of who you really are, understanding your self-concept, your self-identity, and the square from this Mars retrograde in Cancer at 19 degrees is a trigger. It's a hot spot. It's highly sensitive. This is occurring the beginning of February. Specifically February 2nd until February 7th. So keep your eyes open to those emotional triggers or anything that you're maybe stuck with. There's frustration here and anger with this square because Mars wants it to be solved, wants it to be done or taken care of. But the trigger from Chiron is revealing another injury or something that's not fully healed yet. And so being aware of anything that arises through impatience, pain, anger, and frustration will be important when Mars squares Chiron in Aries. But thankfully, right after that transit, Mars then receives a trine from Saturn in Pisces at 18 degrees. And this trine from February 6th until February 12th is maturing, supportive, stabilizing, provides the perspective of what you can do something about and what you can't do anything about. And the Saturn trine is actually saying, let it go, let yourself grow from this, be mature, honor your spiritual path and your spiritual integrity, be wise with your energy. So Mars feels supported here by that Saturn in Pisces at 18 degrees, and that could be an elder, a father, a mentor, Saturn is someone who has more life experience, who's been to more rodeos than you have, who's lived through some things and has learned about how life works and how energy works. Again, this is supporting Mars in saying, just detach, step away, don't put energy into anything that is getting you all riled up or spinning you up into a tornado. Rather, this is a time of spiritual mastery around your emotional self, your emotional core. And one of the gifts that this Mars retrograde in Cancer is learning is how to be in control of his emotions, how to be mature, how to be aware of his own level of responsibility, action, choices, behavior, and to take care of the parts of himself that he's been disconnected from. Because again, Mars hasn't been retrograde here for over 30 years. So it's bringing all of us back to at least 30 years ago. So think back to how old you were 30 years ago in the early 1990s. Again, 1992, 1993 was the last time Mars came through here and triggered this area of your chart and this area of your world. But because Mars is so supported by these outer planets, again, supported by Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn, there's something you're closing out here. You're emotionally completing and growing through it. You're understanding what any patterns have been for you, especially emotional patterns. And you're also being given the opportunity to give yourself what you never had. To be, again, that parent, that caregiver, but to be more of the wise one at this time, to allow these emotional messages to be powerful indicators of your own brilliance, your own wisdom, how to navigate the world while still hearing what you need and what's going on within you. It is more emotional, it's more feminine, internal, trusting and flowing. This is not a Mars transit that is going to make sense logically. You're not going to have the exact details, specifics, or even rationale around what you're feeling and what's coming up. Rather, you're moving through a cycle that's putting you into the river of life, the river of emotions, the river of flow that is part of how we're designed to move through this experience. But it's showing you what's been backed up, what's been repressed, what hasn't been carefully or fully loved. And so that would be my final message here, is that this Mars retrograde in Cancer is going to reveal what hasn't been loved, welcomed, or accepted, what hasn't been fully embraced or cared for. And that can bring up feelings that are uncomfortable. This will be an uncomfortable energy at times, depending on how you deal with water sign energy. But this is returning you to the great mother within, the great source of flow and creation, the great womb of the universe, where you can realign with what you need, what you deserve, and what supports you, perhaps for the first time in your life. There's tenderness here and care. There's an honoring of where you feel sensitive, where you feel emotional, allowing yourself to feel the feels, to let the tears flow if needed, to just trust that the universe is guiding you through a deeper journey than perhaps you realized or intended. This can be wonderful for doing any inner child work, attachment style work, mother wounding work, especially if it's with the intention of loving yourself more, understanding your own needs, and giving yourself what you were previously denied. In this podcast, I'm only covering the Mars retrograde until February 23rd, where Mars stations direct at 17 degrees of Cancer. And so I'll be back with a part 3 on this topic, where we will then look at, well, what happens next as Mars stations direct at 17 degrees of Cancer, and we'll then move ahead and have more beneficial aspects to the outer planets that support him in this realignment, that supports this expanded heart, this new sense of love, care, and emotional maturity, that gives Mars new tools to work with, especially when we look at connection, attachment, and trusting others. This is deep, emotional reprogramming that honestly, maybe some people are like, I didn't sign up for this, but this is what the universe is guiding us towards. And this is where you're going to find even more parts of yourself to embrace and accept. At a practical level, give yourself more time and space if you need it. Give yourself more time to be left alone, to go for a walk, to take care of your body, to move the energy. Give yourself space to journal, to release what you're really feeling, to get to the heart of what's been going on that is private. This is a private energy. And so understand that that's what many people could be moving through, even if they don't know it. But honor it for yourself. Honor what is coming up for you. And know that those triggers are guiding you to beautiful new insights and brilliant breakthroughs. You want to look at where you have 29 degrees of Cancer to 17 degrees of Cancer in your chart. This is the territory that Mars is retrograding through. And the house that Mars is in is where this energy is coming up for you. It's where it's arising for you to feel and move through and work with. It's also where you're going to have new emotional alignment, new satisfaction, new love for yourself, and also feel strengthened. Because after Mars goes through a retrograde, he comes out the other side stronger, clearer, and wiser. So there are rewards here that come about from every retrograde cycle. As always, I hope this has supported you and guided you into more of what you need right now or what may be arising for you. And as I mentioned, we'll be doing a part 3 later in February. I'll be back every Monday and Wednesday for a new podcast episode. The Wednesday episodes are the ones where we talk about the weekly energies. So I hope you'll join me for that next broadcast. Wishing you a beautiful journey through this time period on Earth, knowing that all is well, all is divine, all of you is supported and loved, and that there is much that we will gain from this transit. Take good care, and I'll see you back here soon.